visa and the status. Status is really a classification. It is an immigration classification under which you have been issued that visa. And you're going to see that as a class, it's really indicated on your I-94. That's the arrival and departure record. It's usually described as an alphabet. So you're going to see a B1, B2, that's for a tourist visa. You're going to see an F1 for student visa and J1 and on and on. That's how it goes. So the topic today is really how can you maintain your status after entering the United States? So before I delve into that, there's some instances where your visa will expire before your status. Well, if that happens, it's okay. So long as you're in the United States and you've entered here with a visa, even if your visa expires, so long as your status is still valid, you are eligible to remain in the United States as long as you follow the immigration regulations and don't violate the terms of your status. Now, the consequences. What are really the consequences of violating the terms of your visa or your status? Well, if you violate the terms of your status or your visa, it means that you will be deemed out of status, your status will be terminated, and you will jeopardize any opportunity to re-enter the country and may be subjected to immigration or removal proceedings. So what does maintaining status really mean? So maintaining status means that you are fulfilling the purpose for which the Department of State issued you that visa. And it really means following the terms of your visa. So in describing this, I'm going to tell you about the tourist visa, but I'm going to dwell more for the purpose of this presentation on the F1 visa or F1 status. So when you come into the country as a visitor, your I-94 will indicate how long you're supposed to stay in the United States. It could be for a month, it could be for 3 months, it could be for 6 months. Whatever dates is put there stamped in your I-94, you have to take cognizance of that date, and you have to ensure that you can only remain in the United States for the duration of the dates, within the dates indicated on your I-94. When you stay beyond that date, without taking further action, and action will be, if you intend to stay longer for some reason, you can apply for an adjustment, for an extension of your status, or you can apply for a change of status. If you don't do any of those or take any of those actions, then you really need to leave by the date indicated on your I-94. So that is one of the terms of the visa or you have been given, which you are entitled, which you are supposed to comply with. The other reason, again, will be employment. As a visitor, you're not entitled to work in the United States. So if you work, you're violating the terms of your visa. And again, that may result in the termination of your status, and you may not be allowed to come into the United States again. So going to the F1 status. That's the student visa. I'm going to tell you about how to obtain a student visa, and then we can now go into how to maintain your status as a student. So in applying for a student visa, you need to apply, and you need to be accepted by an SEVP. It's called a Student and Exchange Visitor Program Certified School. So once you've been accepted by that school, the school will issue you a form called an I-20, which is a certificate of eligibility for non-immigrants. So if you're coming in for if you're coming in for undergraduate studies, the I-20 is valid for 5 years, and if it's for graduate studies, it is for 3 years. So what that does is, if you have been issued a visa, if you have been granted admission, and as well issued the I-20, you're not entitled to just jump into the plane and start getting into the United States. So what you need to do is you still have to apply for a visa. You still have to go to the embassy, apply for a visa. And if you're granted a visa, you will now have to come into the United States. Now, I'm going to tell you something about the I-20. When you receive your I-20, there are 3 things I would like you to take notice of. One is the program. What is this program you're coming here to study for? Secondly, would be the start date of the program. And thirdly, would be the end date of the program. So after you have received your I-20 and you have applied for a visa, you are not supposed to apply for a visa or obtain a visa until 120 days before your program start date. Also, even if you've been issued with a visa, you cannot enter the country immediately. You cannot enter, you may just enter no more than 30 days before your program start date. So I'd like you to take cognizance of all these dates, because if you come into the country more than 30 days, you'll be turned back. So it is very important that you take cognizance of these dates. Usually for a student visa, your passport, you'll be stamped DS, that's duration of status. And what does that mean? It means you can stay in the United States so long as you are in school. So having told you how to obtain a visa, the next thing I would want to talk to you about will be, how do you maintain this visa? How do you maintain your status after entering the United States as a student? So when you get to school, your college or any school admitting you, there is one person I'd like you to always be in touch with, and that is called the designated school official. In some schools, it's called an International Student Services Advisor. You'd always want to be, as an international student, you'd always want to be in touch with this person. And this is different from an academic advisor. You will still have your academic advisor, but you want to be sure in terms of immigration that you're in touch with your DSO or the ISSA, that's International Student Services Advisor. And the reason is this: there is a portal called the SEVIS, SEVIS. It's a Student and Exchange Visitor Information System. That's a database immigration maintains. And what it does is it has all the information of all non-immigrants coming in as students. So they maintain everything about that. You as a student will not have access to it. It's just your DSO. So it's always important that if you're making any changes or taking any actions, your DSO knows about it in order to update the SEVIS record. So for a student, if you're coming in for an undergraduate study, you're required to maintain a minimum of 12 credit hours per quarter or semester. If you're a graduate student, you're required to maintain a minimum of 10 credit hours per quarter or semester. So the question is, are there any exceptions? What if I can't maintain this number of credit hours? This is the time to talk to your DSO. So your DSO in certain circumstances may allow you to under-enroll, but for some reasons, maybe medical issues or simply academic difficulties. But the DSO will not know any of these unless you communicate this to your DSO. So it's always important to be in touch with your DSO. And now with COVID-19, every school will have their own requirements on what a full-time status is. So it's important that you go in touch with your DSO to know whether a hybrid class, an online class will qualify as part of the full-time status. So your program, like I said, the program start dates and end dates are very important. The end date, you have to finish your program before the end date or by that end date. If for some reason you believe that you're unable to complete your program by the end date, then this is a time to talk to your DSO and do that timely, who may be able to apply for an extension on your behalf. So it's always important to communicate with your DSO. So while in school, maintaining all these credit hours, do you just maintain the credit hours? You're still expected to do well. You're still expected to maintain a decent GPA so that you can avoid an academic probation or suspension. You don't want any of those as an international student, because that may also result in your termination of in the termination of your status. So you want to avoid those scenarios. You want to be serious about your studies. You want to maintain normal academic process. And with the program, you're not just going to take any class just to comply with the credit requirements. They have to be related to your program of study, which you are admitted for. So if you're encountering academic difficulties, don't give up, don't get frustrated. Talk to your DSO. Your DSO might be able to grant you some accommodations. Such will be maybe applying for an academic reduced course load. So if you can do that, let your DSO know what is going on with you. So as far as grades, I'm going to tell you the kind of grades you should avoid. You should not want that because there are immigration consequences to those. The first one will be the EU. It's called the unofficial withdrawal. And that it means when you don't attend the class for which you are registered. You don't want that. The second one is withdrawal. It's a W, which means that it's a grade that is given to you when you voluntarily withdraw from a class. So before you drop a class, make sure you let your DSO know. The third is a V. That's an audit. And this is a grade that is given to you when you attend the class, but you don't participate in that class for a grade. So you're just attending classes, but you're not going to take any test, you're not going to take any exam. That is not good. So you should let your DSO know when any of these happens. So in addition to that, I have talked to you about dropping less than full time. If you're encountering academic difficulties, you should always let your DSO know. Are there exceptions where you can maintain less than the full credit hours? Yes, there are exceptions. During the summer vacation, if you intend to take classes during summer, which some people are very interested in doing, you can enroll less than your full credit hours. And this without even the approval of the DSO. But I'll still advise you, let your DSO know at every instance because the regulations change. Also, if you're in the last semester of your final year, maybe before you graduate, you're also allowed to enroll in less credit hours. But you need to talk to your DSO. So these following actions are actions I would advise you or encourage you not to take without consulting your DSO. So first is don't change your major without contacting your DSO. You can change your education level. So for instance, if you're admitted to study or to obtain your bachelor's degree, you can't advance to a master's degree without letting your DSO know because you still need an I-20. in order to do that. If you're transferring to a new school, you should let your DSO know. You just don't take that action. If you need to take a break from school, and that happens, or you need to take a leave of absence, let your DSO know. Don't just do that. Also, for financial reasons, if you feel for some reason you can't cope with the financial exposure, let your DSO know. You might have some options, but just don't take those actions without letting your DSO know. So that's all about school and about grades. And now I'm going to let you know what to do as a student, or what is expected from you in terms of travel. You're going to ask, am I able to travel to my home country while I'm a student without violating my immigration status? Of course, yes, you can. So for traveling outside the United States, you can take an annual vacation after completing at least one full academic year. You can also, but before traveling, you're expected to have registered for classes in the following term, maybe after your annual vacation. You should be sure to let your DSO know if you have such travel plans. And at least 2 weeks before you travel, let your DSO know, because the DSO will have to sign on your I-20. There's a portion of your I-20 that's called the travel endorsement section. You'd want your DSO to sign that for you before you travel. So as you make your travel plans, make sure you're also contacting your DSO. You just don't board a plane and leave the country because you're a student or because there's a vacation. Make sure you're doing all of this and you do those timely. So what does that tell you? You need to maintain your passport. Make sure your passport is valid at all times to enable you travel. If you change your address, you need to let the DSO know. And in addition to that, you need to let the USCIS, that's the United States Citizenship and Immigration Services, know, because you're required to report such changes within 10 days after the change. Now that brings me to the next question. Are you allowed to work as a student? How am I going to maintain myself? And here's what I tell you. Can you work as a student? Of course you can. And working as a student, you need to work with authorization of your DSO. So work can be on campus and off campus. So as a student, as an F1 student, you are entitled to work on campus for no more than 20 hours per week. But during the summer vacation, you can work more than 20 hours per week. Now, regarding the off-campus employment, you're not allowed to work off-campus during your first academic year. But after your first academic year, with the permission of your DSO, yes, you can work outside the campus. So off-campus employment comes in 3 different categories. There's one that's called the CPT. It's called the Curricular Practical Training. So as an undergraduate and a graduate, you'll be eligible for the CPT during the program of study. The next one is the OPT, and that's the Optional Practical Training. This is also an off-campus employment, and you can do this following your program of study, or even during your program of study. And then the next one will be the STEM. It's called the Science, Technology, Engineering, and Mathematics, OPT extension. With this, you can still work off campus. However, both the OPT, the CPT, must be directly related to your program of study. So be careful about the kind of employment you take, because if you do that, you may violate the terms of your visa status. However, before your status is terminated, your DSO will usually send you an email. So always endeavor to read your emails and make sure that if there is a DSO, if there's an email from your DSO raising a concern, make sure you respond timely so that you can avoid, so as to avoid the termination of your F1 status. If you work without authorization, it means you're not maintaining your status, and that can lead to the termination of your F1 status. And you may not be able to enter the United States again. You might be deported or removed from the United States just because of that. Now for M1 students, remember the F1 and M1 are under the student visa category. So the M1 students are the vocational students. So here's what they do in order to maintain their status. They have to always let their DSO know they can take a break from school. That's fine. They can travel outside the United States. They can move to a new address. They can request for a program extension. However, they cannot work during their program of study. So if they do that, then it means they're violating the terms of their status, and it may lead to the termination of their status. So now, having known this, the next question will be, so how do I maintain my status, maybe after I've graduated or after my program of study? So after your program of study, you're not required to leave like right away. Immigration will still expect you, or gives you 60 days after the completion of your program to take the following actions so as to still maintain your status. So when you finish the course of study, assuming you finished maybe up to your PhD level, and you're asking what next, what do I do if I really don't want to go back to my country, then these are the options you need to explore. One is, if you're still interested in studying, you can transfer to another school. You can change your educational level. Assuming you came in with a bachelor's, you can get into your master's degree and eventually to your doctorate program. Or you can apply to change status to another visa status. So all these options are what you can do within those 60 days. So don't just let it waste away. Start thinking ahead of time when you're getting closer to your graduation date on what next, what am I supposed to do, and take action so that you don't fall out of status. So what are the benefits of maintaining your status? One of the benefits will be you'll be staying in the country legally. You would have that peace of mind. You will be able to work with your work authorization, and then your service record will not be terminated. But failure to maintain your status will make the DSO terminate your service record as well as your I-20, and then you'll be deemed out of status and maybe deported from the country or subjected to immigration proceedings before deportation. So I guess, is this all scary? No, it should not scare you. Just try as much as possible to maintain that communication with your DSO. It is very, very important. I can't stress that importance anymore. So what do you do? I mean, assuming you find yourself in a situation where you have failed to maintain your status, I guess what you have to do is really, all hope is not lost. That's the time to quickly take action. Make sure you contact an immigration attorney. There are options such as reinstatement of your status. There are also options like where you'd have to leave the country and reapply when you return to your country. So take an action, and just don't say, hey, I am doomed, I've lost my status, or I'm out of status and there's nothing I can do. You can still take action, okay? So I would say that it's always important to get in touch with your DSO. It's always important to talk to an attorney, and I will be willing to answer questions. If you have questions regarding this, I can always follow up with me. So as always, this brings me to the end of our presentation, but before I end, I would like to share a practical tip. And this week, the practical tip is, no matter your educational background, no matter your educational level from your country, home country, I'd encourage you to plan to return to school when you're in the United States. Yes, you might be thinking about the costs. You might be thinking about the loans. Don't let that scare you. Don't let that deter you. It is well worth it. Trust me. And if you do accept or apply for loans, there's nothing unusual about that. Just for you to just try and be responsible about that. Take the loans and pay back. But nothing is more valuable than education. So thank you so much for listening, and thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to connecting with you next week. Bye.
My name is Abdi Haibe. I am a social worker. So please join us on November 3rd to vote for the candidate who is supported by the Service Employee International Union. To find out information about where to vote from home, please go to vote.seiumn.org.
Nouveau à Minneapolis, Tempo Afrique Travel. Vous voulez voyager? Achetez vos billets d'avion à l'agent de voyage Tempo Afrique Travel. Avec l'agent de voyage Tempo Afrique Travel, pas de problème de connexion, pas de problème de transfert de vol. Avec l'agent de voyage Tempo Afrique Travel, c'est le voyage en toute tranquillité, en toute beauté, de votre maison jusqu'à votre destination. Votre satisfaction est notre plaisir.